There is a specific kind of quiet that only exists far from other people, not peaceful. The kind of quiet that makes you aware of every sound you're producing, every footstep, every breath. These are 3 true accounts from people who went somewhere remote and discovered they were not alone. The note was nailed to the fence post at the edge of the property. It said, "You should not have come back." Nora had never been there before in her life. Nora Callahan was 34 years old and had recently inherited a small piece of land in rural Tennessee, 12 acres in a county she had never visited, left to her by a great uncle she had met exactly twice as a child. She was not sentimental about it. She was practical. She drove down from Cincinnati on a Friday in early April with the intention of spending the weekend assessing the property, taking photographs, and deciding whether to sell it or hold it. The land had a house on it. Describing it as a house was generous. It was a 2-bedroom structure that had not been lived in for at least a decade, with a porch that listed to one side and windows covered in plastic sheeting from the inside. There was no running water. The electricity had been disconnected. Nora had brought a sleeping bag, a camp stove, a cooler, and a battery lantern. She had done her research. She knew the nearest town was 11 miles away. She arrived at 3 in the afternoon. The dirt road to the property was unmarked. She found it only because the county deed included a hand-drawn map. She parked in front of the house, got out, and stood for a moment in the silence. No traffic, no voices, no machinery, just wind through the tree line at the far edge of the property, and somewhere distant, a dog barking twice and stopping. She thought, "This is mine." She did not yet understand what that meant to the people who lived nearby. She found the note on Saturday morning. She had walked the perimeter of the property before breakfast, following the fence line, old split rail, mostly intact, to understand where her land ended and the neighboring properties began. The note was folded once and nailed through its center with a single nail, the paper already beginning to wrinkle from morning dew. She unfolded it carefully. "You should not have come back." The handwriting was deliberate, not hurried, printed in dark ink, each letter formed carefully, like someone who had thought about what they wanted to say and then written it with intention. Nora looked up from the note. On the other side of the fence, maybe 60 yards through the trees, she could see the roof line of another house. She stood there for a moment, then folded the note and put it in her jacket pocket. She went back to the house, made coffee on the camp stove, and sat on the porch steps thinking. The most logical explanation was that the note was old, left for someone else, some other time, and she had simply found it. Her great uncle had owned the property for decades. There could have been tenants, disputes, history she knew nothing about. The second most logical explanation was that someone had seen her arrive and assumed she was someone they recognized. A case of mistaken identity. She decided to go introduce herself to the neighbor. She would later describe this decision as the first mistake. The neighboring property was accessed from a different road. She had to drive around to find the entrance. A gravel driveway, a mailbox with no name on it, and a farmhouse that looked occupied. Curtains in the windows, a truck in the yard, a garden plot with early spring plantings along the south wall. She knocked on the door. After a long moment, it opened. A man in his 60s stood in the doorway. He was lean, with pale eyes and the kind of stillness that comes from spending a long time alone. He looked at her without speaking. Nora introduced herself. She told him she had inherited the neighboring property from her great-uncle. She said she had found a note on the fence post and wanted to clear up any misunderstanding. The man looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "What was your uncle's name?" She told him. He nodded slowly. "I didn't leave any note," he said. He held her gaze for a moment longer, then stepped back and closed the door. Not rudely, not aggressively, just closed it. Nora drove back to the property. She sat in the car for a while before going inside. If the neighbor hadn't left the note, then someone else had been on her property that morning while she was asleep. Someone had walked to the fence line, nailed a folded piece of paper to a post, and left without her hearing them. She checked the time she had woken up, 6:45. She had walked the fence line at 7:15, 30 minutes. The note had been there for no more than 30 minutes when she found it. The paper had been damp, not soaked, as if it had been placed there recently, before the morning dew had fully settled. She looked out the car window at the tree line. At the fence line she could barely see from here. At the long grass between the house and the perimeter. She thought about the fact that someone had walked through that grass in the dark, or in the earliest gray of morning, and stood at the fence of her property. She thought about the fact that they had a nail and a hammer with them, that they had planned this. That night she did not sleep well. At some point after midnight, she became aware of a light moving slowly along the tree line at the far edge of the property. A flashlight, moving at walking pace, staying just inside the tree line, visible only as a faint glow through the branches, not a direct beam. It moved from left to right across her field of view. Then it stopped. She watched from the window for 11 minutes. The light did not move again. Then it went out. On Sunday morning, she found a second note. Same nail, same fold, same deliberate handwriting. This one said, "He made a promise. You need to honor it." She called the county sheriff's office from her car before she had fully finished reading it. A deputy drove out that afternoon. He was familiar with the property, familiar with her great-uncle's name, familiar with the neighbor. He listened to Nora carefully, looked at both notes, and walked to the fence line with her. He didn't say much for a while. Then he said, "Your uncle and the man next door had a long-running dispute about this land. Boundary disagreement going back 30 years. Your uncle always said he'd leave it to family. The neighbor always said your uncle had promised him the first right to buy it. There's nothing legally binding, but out here," he paused, "people hold on to things." He spoke with the neighbor. Nora waited by the deputy's car. She couldn't hear the conversation. She watched the two men stand in the farmhouse doorway. The neighbor's expression did not change. The deputy came back and said the neighbor denied leaving the notes. He said he believed him. Nora asked who else could have left them. The deputy looked out at the property for a moment. "How much do you know about your uncle?" he asked. She said, "Not much." He nodded. He told her to call if anything else happened. He gave her his direct number. He drove away. Nora packed her things and left that afternoon. She has not been back to the property. She spent the months since trying to find out more about her great-uncle. What he did, who he knew, what promise he might have made. She found one thing that she hasn't been able to explain. In the county records, she found a survey dispute from 22 years ago. Her uncle's name against the neighbors. The case was dismissed, but attached to the filing was a document, a handwritten agreement between the two men, signed by both, notarized. Her uncle had agreed to give the neighbor first right of purchase upon his death. He had signed it, and then apparently had never mentioned it to anyone in his family. The property is still in Nora's name. She has not sold it. She's also not returned. And she has not yet decided what she owes a dead man's promises. The notes are in a plastic sleeve in a drawer in her apartment in Cincinnati. She hasn't thrown them away. She isn't sure why. The truck had been behind her for 40 miles. She knew this because she had first noticed it at mile marker 49. She was now at mile marker 9, and it was still there. Justine Park was 29 years old, a nurse from Nashville who had spent the weekend visiting her parents in a small town in western Kentucky. She left on Sunday evening later than she intended. Dinner ran long. Her mother wanted to show her something in the garden. There was a conversation on the porch that neither of them wanted to end. It was after 9 when she finally got in the car. The route home took her through 50 miles of 2-lane state highway before she reached the interstate. She had driven it many times. It was straight, flat, and almost entirely without streetlights. Just dark fields on both sides, the occasional farmhouse set back from the road, and small county roads branching off into nothing. She was 30 minutes into the drive when she noticed the truck. It was an older model pickup, dark-colored. She couldn't tell the exact color in the dark. Its headlights were slightly misaligned, the left one sitting a degree lower than the right. That asymmetry was what made it identifiable. It was keeping pace with her, not tailgating, maintaining a distance of roughly 4 or 5 car lengths, consistent. She noticed it because she had slowed to check a road sign and the truck had slowed with her, keeping the same distance without passing. She sped up slightly. The truck sped up. She told herself this was nothing. Same direction, same destination, someone who happened to be driving her speed. It happened. She passed the junction for Route 12. The truck stayed on the state highway behind her. She passed the grain elevator at mile marker 31. The truck was still there. She called her boyfriend on the car's Bluetooth. She talked to him about nothing. His day, her parents, the drive. She didn't mention the truck. She didn't want to say it out loud yet. She was at mile marker 19 when she told him. He said to stay on the phone. He said to watch for the next town. There was no town. The next gas station was at mile marker 6. She knew, because she had stopped there before. She told him. He said, "Go there. Pull up to the pump under the lights. Don't get out of the car until you see other people." She watched the rear view mirror. The asymmetric headlights left one a degree low. At mile marker 12, she did something she hadn't planned. She pulled off abruptly onto a county road. No signal, no warning, just turned. The truck drove past. She sat on the county road with her headlights off, engine running, watching the state highway through her windshield. Her boyfriend was still on the line. She told him what she'd done. He said, "Good?" 30 seconds, 45. The truck came back. It had turned around somewhere up the road and was now moving slowly past the county road entrance, its misaligned headlights sweeping across the field as it turned its nose toward her road. Justine put the car in drive and floored it down the county road into the dark. She had no idea where it went. The county road ran through fields for 2 miles before intersecting with another road. She turned, drove another mile, turned again, trying to create distance and direction changes between herself and wherever the truck was. She was on a road she didn't recognize, in the dark, with no GPS signal. Her boyfriend kept talking, calmly, steadily, telling her to keep moving, keep the doors locked, find a light. She found a farmhouse with a porch light on. She pulled into the driveway and leaned on the horn. An older man came to the door. She got out of the car and told him what had happened. He brought her inside without asking questions. His wife made her coffee. He stood on the porch for a while, looking at the road. He came back in and said he hadn't seen any truck. The sheriff's department sent a deputy. He took her statement. He drove the state highway and the county roads. He didn't find the truck. The deputy told her that the stretch of highway she had been driving had 2 incidents in the past 3 years, both involving women driving alone at night, both involving vehicles that followed them for extended distances. Neither of the previous incidents had resulted in a stop or confrontation. Both women had managed to reach populated areas. He said, in both cases, the vehicle turned off before anything happened. Could be someone testing, could be coincidence. He said it without convincing either of them. Justine's boyfriend drove from Nashville that night and followed her home. She has since changed her route, a longer way that adds 20 minutes, but stays on the interstate. She has not driven the state highway at night again. She told this account on a forum for women who drive alone at night. The post received over 400 replies. 11 of them described a dark truck with misaligned headlights, left one sitting a degree lower than the right, in 3 different states. The deputy's report is still open. No suspect identified. No vehicle found. The highway runs the same as it always did. Straight, flat, dark on both sides. The well had been sealed for 40 years. The realtor mentioned it during the walkthrough. She said it like she was mentioning the age of the water heater. She did not explain why it had been sealed. When Thomas and his wife Evelyn bought the property in rural Ohio, they were not looking for a project. They were looking for land, space, quiet, distance from a city that had started to feel like it was pressing in on them from all sides. The property was 90 acres. A farmhouse, built in the 1890s, recently updated. New roof, new plumbing, new electrical. A barn that needed work but had good bones. And at the edge of the yard, perhaps 30 feet from the back of the house, an old stone well, perhaps 4 feet in diameter, covered with a fitted concrete cap and surrounded by a low wooden barrier. The realtor said, the well was sealed by the previous owner. Not connected to the water supply, you're on municipal now. It's just a feature of the property. Thomas asked why it had been sealed. The realtor said she didn't have that information. They bought the property in June. The first thing Thomas noticed about the well was the smell. Not immediately, it took a few weeks. He first became aware of it in mid-July when the weather was hot and still. A faint smell near the back of the yard, somewhere between earth and something older. He assumed it was the septic system adjusting or something dead in the field. It dissipated after a few days. He forgot about it. The second thing he noticed was the sound. He heard it for the first time in August, at around 2 in the morning. A low, irregular sound that seemed to come from outside. Not an animal he recognized. Not wind. Something with an inconsistent rhythm, almost patient. He went to the back window and looked out. The yard was dark. The well's wooden barrier was a pale rectangle in the moonlight. Nothing moved. He went back to bed. Evelyn hadn't woken. He heard the sound twice more over the following 2 weeks. Always at night, always brief. He began to understand that it was coming from the direction of the well, which didn't make sense to him. The well was sealed. Concrete cap, fitted and heavy. Sound shouldn't carry out of it, and nothing should be making sound inside it, he told himself. Animals, groundwater, the noises old land makes when it settles in summer heat. He was good at telling himself things. In September, he decided to look into the well's history. He found the previous owner through county records, a woman in her 80s now, living in a retirement community in Columbus. He wrote her a letter. He didn't expect a response. She called him 3 days after the letter arrived. Her voice was steady, unhurried. She thanked him for reaching out. She asked how the property was. He said it was fine. He asked about the well. There was a pause. She said, "My husband sealed it in 1983. He didn't give me a reason. He hired someone to make the cap, and he had it fitted in an afternoon, and he never spoke about the well again." Thomas asked if she knew what was in it. She said, "I know what my husband told me when he sealed it." Thomas waited. She said, "He told me some things are better left where they are." Thomas thanked her. She said goodbye. He sat with the phone in his hand for a while after. In October, after the third night of sounds, Thomas went outside at 2 in the morning with a flashlight. He crossed the yard slowly. The grass was wet with dew. The night was clear, cold, and full of stars, and very quiet. He stood at the wooden barrier around the well. He could hear it now more clearly than from the window. Low, irregular. From below, he put his hand on the concrete cap. It was warm. Not body temperature, not dramatically warm. Just warmer than it should have been on a cold October night. Warmer than the stone of the well walls beside it. He stood there for a long time. Then he went back inside and locked the back door, which he had never bothered to do before. He did not go back to the well at night again. In November, after the first hard frost, the sound stopped. Completely. As if something had gone quiet for winter. Thomas told Evelyn everything. She listened without interrupting. Then she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Thomas, the cap." He looked at her. "You said it was warm," she said, "in October when you touched it." He said, "Yes," she said, "I touched it in July when you were in town." He waited. "It was warm then too," she said. "I thought the sun had heated the stone. I didn't think about it." "But Thomas?" "It was 7 in the evening. The well is on the north side of the house." "The north side? Where direct sunlight never reaches?" Thomas hired a structural engineer in the spring, someone he found through the county, someone with no connection to the property, who he told only that he wanted the well assessed for safety before possibly reopening it. The engineer came on a Tuesday morning in April. He spent 40 minutes at the well with equipment Thomas didn't recognize. He took readings. He measured. He knocked on the cap in several places with a small mallet. He came back to where Thomas was waiting by the barn and said, "Well's intact, cap's solid. No structural issues." Thomas asked if he could tell what was down there. The engineer said the well appeared to be dry. No water table contact, which was unusual for the depth. He said his equipment showed some thermal irregularity at the lower depth, which he attributed to geothermal variation. Not uncommon in older wells, he said. The earth holds heat unevenly. Thomas asked how far down it went. The engineer checked his notes. He said, 92 feet. He paused. Although, he looked at his instrument readings again. "My equipment reads the bottom at 92 feet, he said, but the stone lining only goes to 60. Below 60 feet, there's no lining, just open space." He said it like it was a minor curiosity, a note to follow up on. Thomas did not open the well. He and Evelyn discussed it once more that summer. Evelyn said she thought they should leave the cap as it was. She said she thought the previous owner's husband had been right. Thomas agreed. They have now lived on the property for 3 years. The sounds returned the following summer. Brief, intermittent, at night. They return each summer and stop each November. They have learned not to go outside when they hear them. They have also learned not to touch the cap. Not because it frightens them anymore, but because Evelyn noticed something last summer that she wishes she hadn't. The cap is warm even in winter now, even in January, even on the coldest nights they've had. The well is still sealed. Thomas says they plan to stay on the property indefinitely. He says they've gotten used to it. He says that carefully, like a man choosing his words. 3 places. 3 things that didn't add up. The countryside keeps its secrets differently than the city does. Longer, quieter, and with far fewer witnesses. If something happened to you out there, you know where to find us.